Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Conspiracy Farm, where we don't start the conspiracies, we just add the water. And now, your host of the most state-of-the-art, most informed podcast on the interweb, I present to you Pat Miletich and Jeffrey Wilson. Ladies and gentlemen, are you ready for...
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are locked and loaded, off to the races yet once again for another installment of the Conspiracy Farm, ladies and gentlemen, where we do not start the conspiracies, we just add a little water sometimes. And today, man, wow, very stoked to talk to this gentleman. Obviously, Pat, UFC Hall of Famer, myself, huge fan of the sport. This guy, man, one of the pioneers, quite frankly. He is a co-creator, matchmaker, color commentator, for Extreme Fighting, former matchmaker and color commentator. Also the Contenders and also the Boss Rutten Invitational. He was the matchmaker and color commentator for the Ultimate Fighting Championship. Wow, we're going to get into it today. John Perretti is joining us. How are you doing today, sir?
Very good, sir.
And, of course, riding shotgun as always, my man with the plan who is back from Vegas, UFC Hall of Famer Pat Miletich. How you doing, champ?
I'm doing great, man. I'm excited and honored that John Perretti is on the podcast with us. We're going to take a tour down the real history of mixed martial arts in this country and a lot of other martial arts talk with John Perretti, a guy that's a legend with a massive amount of experience and had an amazing amount of vision in terms of mixed martial arts and the guy that really is responsible for developing the sport and creating so many things like weight classes and rules that a lot of other people claim that they were the ones that did, and they just aren't.
Well, he's gonna straighten it all out for us today. You doing okay today, John?
I am. I guess I am the definition of a has-been. So I think that's what Pat was saying right then.
Well, if you're a has-been, I'm definitely a has-been. We're both still fighting gravity though, which is most important.
I retain a little more gravity than you. I'm 61 now.
Whew. You look fantastic, bro. You look fantastic.
So before we get started on all of this stuff, let's talk about your boy, man. Huh?
My sons?
Yeah, your sons. They're machines.
Sorry?
They're machines, right? These kids are tearing it up.
Well, no, actually, Luca, my oldest son, he's 21. He left Michigan State. He left the world team, and now is in Mississippi State. And Enzo, he's getting ready to graduate high school. He's 17. Looks like he's headed for West Point.
Awesome.
But yeah, they were, four-time national Olympic lifting champions. Luca was 22nd in the world, and it's a very tough sport in the United States. It gets no support, and because of Luca, actually, I'm an internationally ranked Olympic lifting coach, and we had the #1 youth team in the United States of America for 3 years. So I mean, it was called Team Unattached, and yeah, I'm very proud. I'm very proud of them. They're really in the United States. We will get, I think, one person into the Olympics, and I think it looks like it's going to be a young man that Luca competed against and beat in 2020 in Tokyo.
Okay.
So it gives you an idea of how insignificant it is in the United States, although incredibly important on a world stage.
Right. Well,
so we have no support, zero support.
Right, but nonetheless, you did an amazing job with your boys, and your boys are obviously the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, at least.
Well, the tree's broken, but thank you, thanks, champ.
No, you were an incredible athlete in your prime, my friend. I know that. So.
Well, yeah, that's something. I mean, not a lot of people. I mean, a lot of people are obviously familiar with Mr. Perretti and his contribution to the sport. If you don't mind, rewind the clock for us a bit, my friend. How did you get yourself? Obviously, the bug bites everybody a little bit differently. When did the martial arts bug bite you, sir?
Well, I mean, I was a really terrible athlete until, I found fighting, so to speak. But I am a third-generation pugilist. My great-granduncle John, who my father was named after, he won the Golden Gloves in New York City. My godfather, he was a weightlifter. It all kind of melded when I found that. But I really became a fighter, out of insecurity, and I was, badly abused as a child by my father. So I never really found a niche. I was a bad high jumper. I couldn't run. I have too much turnout on my right foot, which helped me kick, and I had people that I thought were great, and I still do, Benny Urquidez and Bill Wallace. And then Joe Louis became a really good friend of mine. He's now dead, through Gene LaBelle. But I started off basically with Taekwondo, Muay Thai, and Tang Soo Do. And instead of joining one school of thought, they're all basically the same anyhow, but I joined 3 schools. That's how motivated I was
Nice.
to start this process. And again, as my junior high school track coach said, only when I was in 9th grade, he said I was the worst athlete he had ever coached. It's a quote. He also said that the United States was going to switch to the metric system, and that was in 1976, within a year. So, he wasn't a rocket scientist.
I remember being told we were going to switch to the metric system, and I refused to learn the damn thing.
Well, I know kilograms really well as a weightlifter, so
Right.
So
Understandably.
But other than that, I'm clicks are real hard for me.
I get furious when my treadmill goes in kilometers and not miles.
Yeah, clicks.
Yeah, there you go. So let's talk about back in the early days of mixed martial arts. The history of it, the all the catch wrestling and stuff that ended up having a resurgence in all the stuff, the vision that you had and how that all went down. Tell us the history of the UFC Extreme Battlecade. Go back to the Contenders, which I was there arcade side for that, which was an amazing event. It's just nobody realized the legendary names that were actually in that event.
Okay, so it's hard to back up, when there's been so much obscuring of the facts and disinformation.
Yeah.
But basically, I was one of 4 first black belts from Gene LaBelle. So I had been talking to a lot of people, and Donald Zuckerman, who's the co-producer with me of Extreme Fighting, Battlecade presents Extreme Fighting. Richard Crudo came up with the name Battlecade presents Extreme Fighting. He went to Zuckerman. Zuckerman came to me. I talked to Gene, told him what I was up to. I was taking jiu-jitsu with the Machados. Gene introduced me to them. I was like a VIP. I got to go there, and I've been training with Gene for 5-6 years. And the Machados decided to kick me out of their academy. And you may ask why.
Why?
Yes, why?
And I will tell you why, because it was told to me by a student of the Machados years later, who has a really nice academy in Santa Monica. And he said that the reason that they kicked you out is because you were teaching people that the straight armbar and the go behind choke was not enough to win a fight.
Nice.
And separate from that tattoo on your shoulder there, champ, I still know that that's a fact.
Right.
Because, Gene, taught us really, really early on. I put my hands and my feet in my pocket for 10 years so that I could learn to grapple. And he taught us to do what they don't know. And, having started Extreme Fighting, then got put on hold because of this thing called Woodstock 2 that lost $28 million overnight, we got put on hold. So I had to watch the Ultimate Fighting Championship with really, really knowledgeable people, and I had been doing what they do. I knew Hickson for a long time, and I knew what what was going on, and I knew that the Ultimate Fighting Championship at that point in time was, all purposeful mismatches, and that's my coinage.
Right.
And for me to watch it, it was really disappointing. And I knew that, half those guys couldn't tie their shoes, and that's a Lebellian term. And it wasn't up to snuff. It wasn't what I wanted. So what I had in mind was not no holds barred. And what I had in mind is not what occurred out there until I walked in the door. And I walked in the door, hired by, there's a little train going past, I apologize, hired by Bob Meyerowitz to do a job that he thought I did really, really well, and, succeeded in putting my company, Extreme Fighting, and Donald's out of business. So I walked into the Ultimate Fighting Championship to meet Bob and talk to him literally a week after I was out of business. And there was another guy there, David Isaacs. Was the lawyer. And I walked into there and said, well, I need to look at this and really look at what you guys are doing, because I really disagree with so much about what you're doing. And he goes, well, you were the right man for the job. And they got rid of their matchmaker after I did a little investigating for 2 weeks and came back to them. But I walked in there, and I say it again, with the rules, with the talent, with the gloves, with Dr. Aswanik, the co-founder of those gloves, the
right.
co-creator. I walked in with the idea of rounds. I walked in with the weight classes. All these things pre-existed the UFC, as you know.
Yes, absolutely.
And I walked in with the champions, and I walked in with all that talent in my pocket and the ability to make fair matches. Now, with that ability, I made enemies within minutes, because 1 week the wrestlers hated me, the next week the jiu-jitsu guys hated me, the next week the stand-up guys didn't like me. Then, we had some really good boxers, and they didn't like me. And then, and it just, guys didn't talk to me. Guys got in my face. I actually, you were there one night for that.
Was that when Ken got in your face?
Yeah. And I treated Mikey Burnett, like gold. I mean, I put him up against Eugenio Tadeo. I mean, I don't even want to go into that. But but the point I'm trying to make here is that you, as a matchmaker who does not lean in any direction, I put my friends in tough. I put everybody in tough. My friends took it the worst, because a lot of them got their asses kicked.
Right. No, that's when the skilled, I mean, even in Battlecade, you had so many talented, skilled people fighting, Murillo Bustamante and Tom Erickson and monsters like that. Mario Sperry.
Oh my God! And listen to this.
Igor Zinoviev.
Speaking of Sperry and Zinoviev, this is another fact that nobody really knows, is that I had a gym in New York City called Madison Avenue Muscle. That's where I came up with those MMA, MAM. I love repeating consonants. When my book comes out, you'll see that the whole book is repeating consonants. It's just the way that I write. It's always been that way. However, no one knows this. We got taken off the air and we got postponed because of lack of funds. But I met with Horian Gracie to have Hoist Gracie have a real fight in Extreme Fighting. We were signing a deal. In fact, a member of my gym, Madison Avenue Muscle, was actually representing Hoist through and Horian at the time at the meeting. Knew me as soon as I walked in. He was like, "John, it's me." I was like, "Oh wow, I haven't seen you in years." He goes, "Yeah, how you doing?" He goes, "Great to see you. Let's get down to business here." So Hoist Gracie was going to fight this guy who was the captain of the Russian judo team. His name was Igor Zinoviev. Hoist, we did not go on, and we were postponed. We raised more money through Donald Zuckerman and Bob Guccione, and we ended up putting him up against the most difficult jiu-jitsu guy that I could find. Absolutely. And I trained Zinoviev for 2 years prior to Battlecade.
Okay.
So, I mean, he can tell you the horrendous things, you know. I mean, he wanted to kill me most of the time. You know, I have him running on the beach holding a giant, you know, tire around his waist while two guys punched him in the face. And, you know, I mean, in the rain, in the cold, in the sleet. No, I mean, Pat knows I'm telling the truth.
Yeah.
It's my training methodologies, you know, they might have been, you know, in the day unsound, but I actually knew what I was doing because, you know, I had, you know, wet towels put on my face, you know, by Gene LaBelle, you know, at the end of class, you know, and you know, basically get waterboarded, you know. So I understood, you know.
What the hell? That's crazy.
No, that's the truth. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, wet geese, you know, I mean, the whole idea of,
Jesus,
you know, Lebellian, you know, training, it was unbelievable. It really was unbelievable. And again, I was only allowed to take my legs out of my pocket, you know, every once in a while when someone got nasty. And plus, I had a school since '74. I had my
Right.
first school, then I had the Southampton Martial Arts Institute when I went to college, and then I had my other school in New York City at 109 West 26th Street. That was basically the first mixed martial arts school. There was ads in the Village Voice saying that this was a mixture of martial arts school. I really understood what Zinoviev could handle. And he was always broken. He had a bad shoulder and he had a bad back. But can you imagine? I asked Jeremy Horn this the other day. Can you imagine what would have happened to Royce Gracie versus Igor Zinoviev?
Oh, Igor would have pulled his arms off of him. Igor was a beast. He really was. He was a rough cat. You know, let's talk about Gene LaBelle a little bit and his good old Armenian friend over there. You know, they've produced.
No, I'd rather not, actually.
All right, we'll just talk about Gene.
Thank you.
But Gene in his prime was a really, I mean, that dude was an absolute badass.
I got a great story for you. I'm talking to Carl Gotch on the phone. I'm in New York. I'm in Long Island, New York. And I'm talking to Carl Gotch on the phone. And I'm interviewing him and for myself. And I'm saying, you know, Carl, blah, 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 because Carl did everything, you know, just like, as Gene said, just like you, John. He lifted weight. You know, he did Olympic lifts. He did this. He did this. He did that. And you do everything. Right. And he did it. You would have loved him. He goes, when I was using 50-pound dumbbells, this is LaBelle speaking, he was using 120s. Actually kettlebells, by the way. And then, you know, and then I said to Carl, you know, like, you know, Gene says this, and he goes, let me tell you something, Sonny. That's what he called me on the phone, Sonny. He goes, I never beat Gene LaBelle in a straight shoot.
Wow. Yeah, Gene LaBelle was that good.
And I was like, whoa. And then Gene, when I told him he said that, he goes, he was twice as strong as me. He was twice as bad as me. You know, he could take those, you know, Olympic wrestlers and turn them into knots. He goes, so, you know, that kind of stuff was so important to me because if I could take a stand-up fighter, pick one, right, and get him through the use of real Olympic athletes in wrestling,
right,
to defend the takedown, then the whole jiu-jitsu game, separate that tattoo on your shoulder, the whole jiu-jitsu
I had it covered
game,
up with an Irish cross.
The whole jiu-jitsu game
just
is
so you know.
null and void. I now know.
Well, you know, I became and for me, I mean, with my wrestling background in Iowa, I basically became, you know, a hybrid, a catch wrestler more than anything else. You know what I mean? So obviously there was a lot of Brazilian jiu-jitsu in my game, submissions and stuff, but there was a lot of catch wrestling also. I just had to become a hybrid, period. You know, with the Muay Thai, the boxing, the leg locks of Sambo, all that good stuff. You know, had to go in. For me at least, I wasn't good enough at wrestling. You know, after getting my ass kicked in the state of Iowa my whole life, that I knew that I had to be, you know, at least well-rounded to be able to beat people. That's all I knew.
I will actually say, and you can read it in my book because my book will be out within the next 6 months. But I will actually say that you, and I say it in the book, unless my editor got to it because she took me from 1,000 pages to 500 now. That you were the most well-rounded.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate it.
Well, I mean, I'm not saying it to blow smoke up your ass. I don't really give a shit. If I'd say it to your face too. You were the most well-rounded.
And that was done that was done out of fear because I didn't want to get my ass kicked. You know what I mean?
I also saw you in incredible pain. I don't know where we were. I was the referee for some other organization, and I saw you fighting a kickboxer. I can't remember, but you had that SI joint pain, and you were just miserable. Refresh my memory.
Oh, that was our friend, the orthopedic surgeon down in Atlanta.
Okay.
I was fighting Jose Pele Landy, and I hadn't trained for that fight at all. They had paid me my show money early so that I had money for Christmas to buy gifts, and so I had no choice but to fight to get my show.
Dr. John Keating.
Yeah, and so I was backstage, and basically I would run practice. I'd start practice with the guys on my team, and then my back would lock up again, and I'd be crippled laying in the corner coaching. And so I had to fight, though. So I made the trip down there with those guys. Jens Pulver fought on the card, Matt Hughes, Jeremy Horn, I think. There were several others. But and
one really good referee.
Absolutely. And I was back in the locker room and was panic stricken because I couldn't walk because my back was so bad. And so Dr. John Keating said, well, we got to at least get you to the cage. So what he did was he shot up my SI joints and my low back with about 12 shots of whatever Xylocaine or whatever the hell he was using back then to numb me up so that they could.
He absolutely knew what he was doing.
Yeah, and he at least was able to walk to the cage and get in there and fought the first. It was 3 8-minute rounds, I think, back then, and I fought the first 8-minute round with Pele, and then I just couldn't walk anymore, and I was done. So
you seized.
And he had, and the thing was,
seized. You really seized. I know that feeling.
Locked up. Yeah, but the thing was, Pele wasn't strong. He didn't have a lot of power or anything like that. I was just crippled, but he couldn't do anything to hurt me. It pissed me off to be that injured and not be able to fight. It was very frustrating. Wow. And he was
like
second in the world at that time.
No, but I don't think you're really giving him the credit.
No, he was amazingly fast.
He was a whip.
Athlete. He ran a whip. He ran up my chest to my face with his knees.
He was a whip. He was incredibly gifted. And as a kickboxer, he was highly recognized.
Yeah.
There were a lot of great legs out there.
That old shootbox team. Those shootbox guys. Those guys were scary. We almost had a massive.
I met those guys on the beach.
Yeah, we almost had a massive brawl with those guys in the tunnel of that stadium. My team and their team. We almost went at it, and but later on we grew to respect each other a lot, and it started over in Kuwait when Matt Hughes, Pele, Carlos Newton, Dave Manet, Barkalov, all those guys were in that same tournament in Kuwait, and Pele got beat by Barkalov. He got crushed by Barkalov, and Matt Hughes had already gotten knocked out by Pele in the first round with a knee to the head. And back at the hotel, we ended up getting along with those guys real well after that. We were just kind of tired of fighting with each other, you know what I mean?
So I found, I know that sounds ridiculous, but I found those guys.
Yeah.
I found those guys and coined Vanderlei as the axe murderer on a beach in Brazil. While I was, and it was really hard because I was very distracted by the asses on the beach. So, but I understood fighting so well that I knew that I was looking at things that were real, and I watched them very carefully, and then I realized their hatred for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I realized that I had found another niche, and there were lots of them, trust me, but I had found another niche by which to embrace, ways to make better fights.
Right.
And, I could go on and on and on about how people were found and so on and so forth, even though, again, I didn't do anything. And someone quoted that not in a million years did these guys think that they were actually creating a sport. And I took offense to that a couple of years back. But I had every intention of creating a sport from the get-go, and that's why the UFC was so disappointing to me.
Yeah, now let's talk about the UFC. When the UFC was purchased from Semaphore Entertainment by Dana White's friends, the Fertittas. I mean, you have no idea the doom and gloom that went through my mind and my entire camp, because Dana White, of course, at the time was Tito Ortiz's manager, and we went, oh God, this is not good. I mean, what was going through your mind at that time?
Well, let me tell you exactly how it happened, because it's never been talked about, and basically, I don't exist. So, nobody could fuck up a sport at that point in time in my mind. Nobody. There's just no way. It was so beautiful. The only thing we didn't have is money. And the only thing that stopped us from going to Vegas was two guys in Vegas and the boxing commission.
Right.
Who ended up buying it. Now, I had a contract with partners to buy the Ultimate Fighting Championship. So we had put $200,000 down already, and it was on loan, which was a big mistake. And
Wow.
John Perretti was walking around that week before I went to Italy to do Gangs of New York. A week before that, I was walking around like I already owned the place. I was ready to fire, 8 or 9 people who were, just basically ass lickers. And I was, called in Italy and asked, if I wanted to come and work, for the Fertittas. And I said, well, I was shocked that, that someone had bought it and I didn't know about it, and Bob didn't tell me. And, I was just shocked. And so I said, okay. And I talked to that person, and I asked, well, what are you going to do? And, we're planning on doing something different. We're going to do this, that, and this, and we're going to own the fighters. I said, what? You're going to what? Well, we're planning on owning the fighter. I said, if you own the fighters, you own the results. And they said,
Yeah.
and they said, well, that's our game plan and stuff like that. And I knew that little guy, I forgot his name, the short little guy. I knew he wanted my job, and I knew all these guys were in cahoots, and they were all vying for position. Even supposed friends of mine were trying to get my job. And I just realized that if you're going to take my good name that I worked so hard on for so long, and then you're going to either A, fire me, or B, make strange or odd, I'll use the word odd, matches, and say that I matched that, then you're taking my good name and you are going to use that as a vehicle for you to do things that might look odd to some people who have actually can see. In Italy, I refused to do that. And I said, something, just give, what's his name, my job. I said, I'm done.
Yeah.
I want no part of it.
Right.
And that's what occurred.
Yeah.
And then they used all that talent, and they used it poorly, and brought some questionable people in, and then so on and so forth. And, it's kind of like boxing now that I don't think I want to watch boxing anymore.
John,
Now,
quick question. Why do you think, your contribution obviously was huge. Why do you think, was it just to completely take the shine from you? Why did they obscure your contribution? And, what you just said, like you said that this story kind of hasn't been told. Why did they think they kind of tried to bury that and bury you and your contribution?
Well, something about me and what I did prior to them even, I don't know. Prior to them is threatening to them. And I know guys who are in the inner sanctum in Vegas, and they've told me, straight out that no one's allowed to bring up my name. No one's allowed to say, hey, why don't we? Now you got 2 guys. One's like a comedian who I hired as a backstage commentator, who osmotically are tough guys now. So, like, there's a funny thing that occurs when guys hang around with fighters, right? All of a sudden they put on 30 pounds and they walk around with their puffed out chest, and they start taking jiu-jitsu and they get their little belts, and all of a sudden they become tough guys by osmosis, from an area of greater concentration to an area of lesser concentration. It's kind of like pouring things off, right? So, like, I hang around with Pat Miletich, and then all of a sudden, like, I got the money, and then Pat gets to train me. All of a sudden, Pat gives me a black, so on and so forth. And that's what occurred, and that's what occurred.
Yeah.
And that's what has occurred, and that's why I'm not on these shows, albeit, from people who have the balls to put me on, like the two of you, hopefully containing 4 testicles. I am here, and I am a threat because it's real. I sent you this thing, Jeff. 2 days ago, 2 guys, it was the first time, 2 guys on Facebook told me in writing that they fought on Extreme Fighting and that I was completely wrong about the fight that I had just, witnessed and so on and so forth. But 2 guys in one day. And both of them were, obviously full of shit. And I let them go long and hard and hang themselves into a corner. And this kind of stuff has been going on for years. It's like I'm like the guy to call for the Navy SEALs. They say, hey, I'm in a bar. I'm in Dallas. I got this guy here. He said he fought in the Ultimate, and he fought in a pre-fight in Extreme Fighting. I said, oh, in a pre-fight. And where did that pre-fight occur? Put him on the phone. And he goes, oh, no. He goes, I got John Perretti on the line. You know who John Perretti is? He goes, no, I heard his name. I said, well, I could hear his voice, and they said, well, why don't you talk to John Perretti? He started Extreme Fighting. And he said, he left the bar.
Well,
So,
and another.
go
ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No. It was part of kind of stealing your shine is going on to this day. You kind of co-founded and were a big part of what was, I think I don't know if it was plural, the Contender or the Contenders, and now here Dana White and the UFC is with a new show called The Contenders. Is that completely separate from what you did, or is that just another aspect of them stealing your stuff?
Well, actually, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah,
it
was a Tuesday night.
Contenders.
It was a Tuesday night fight series, John, that was going on their UFC Fight Pass app that they were doing, and frankly, taking a lot of talent from the cards that we were calling on Access TV, which did not make me happy at all because it was going deep down into the rosters of talent everywhere in the country and screwing up a lot of cards, which actually pissed me off a little bit.
No, I was not aware of that. I've tried to keep myself cloistered from all this stuff, and only recently, since I started writing 4 years ago, have I started to look at what people are actually saying. The Contenders is a trademark. In fact, someone's doing a documentary on it right now in L.A. But Contenders is a trademark. The Japanese stole it first. They stole it as international rights to use it, but John Perretti owns the Contenders. If anyone uses the Contenders, then they
I get a call from your attorney.
You got some money out there waiting for you, John, because he's had that show going for how long's it going, Pat? Past few months.
Yeah. I think they just did their last one.
I'm sure what they've done is they've had their lawyers look at it and said, well, he hasn't used it. So there's a statute of limitations on that, and that was in oh boy, I don't even remember exactly when. So they do their homework, and again, airbrushing myself out of the history books is it takes homework. The first thing that they did is they got rid of all the footage of myself in the UFC. They completely deleted all that.
They deleted, remember when I had the falling out with them? They deleted me off their website.
Well, they have deleted Bob Carson
interviews, and Bob didn't even know how it was done, but it was the first time it had ever been done to him, and it would happen with me on. They've erased stuff. They've gotten rid of the first press release for Extreme Fighting somehow off the internet, and now Extreme Fighting, you know, I wrote that press release, and it's attributed to Rick Bloom, who I replaced, who was not the co-producer and nor the founder of Extreme Fighting, and that was the first use of the words mixed martial arts, except by a pencil neck writer. But other than that, I wrote that press release, and I had been using that term mixed martial arts since the late 70s, and I have historians that will vouch for that, who are actually, one of them's my black belt now, Dr. Peter McGuire. Anyway, I don't know anything about the Contenders. I'm glad I'm sitting down. I might have fallen off the chair. But
Sorry.
But I fall down quite frequently, so that wouldn't be new. But I'm going to look into it. I'm going to call Donald Zuckerman he's a lawyer and he's my ex-partner on the Contenders. When I get off the phone and ask him about it. I'm sure there's a statute of limitations, and that's why they got away with it. I'm sure they wouldn't do anything underhanded.
Well, yeah, in the show prep, when we were originally going to get you on, I mean, obviously I know who you are, but I wanted to, kind of go, just kind of absorb all the videos and all the stuff I could, and I saw you, mentioning the Contenders, and then within a
breaking
few...
up a little. I missed...
No, just as part of the show prep, I watched a lot of videos on you, and some of the things you talked about was the Contenders show, and then a few days or a couple weeks later, I saw Dana has that show, and I was like, wow, I wonder if John knows about that. And I just assumed you did because it was.
I did not.
It was a little bit of out, it was out there for everybody kind of to see.
Yeah.
No, and again, it's not my primary interest.
Sure.
You'll be shocked to know that maybe 15% of my book is mixed martial arts. I mean, I've had a really, really interesting life, and
a lot of movie stuff in there too, John.
There's a lot of movie stuff. I left the movie industry also, but it's just that my life story and my memoirs are, they're interesting in that I don't think any autobiography has ever been like this before. And
no, you're very diverse. You're a very diverse dude. That's the thing about it is.
I was the youngest college professor in the School of Visual Arts. At 24 years old, full-time professor. I mean, I taught there for 10 years, and I was a painter. I did poetry for 20 years. Now I'm a writer, and I'm working on my novel for 3 years. It's not all about that for me, and I'm really happy. Where I'm at, although, physically, I'm hurting. But I'm very happy not to have participated in all the things that these guys have done. And I disagree with a lot of it. So, I'm really content. It's not like, ooh, where is he now? That some people have said recently on podcasts, look, he's nobody. But my world is a lot more diverse than theirs.
Clearly, yeah.
Yeah, no, so let's talk about fast forward now through all the history that has been mixed martial arts that you've been instrumental in making happen, and again, I'm trying to airbrush you out of the history books, but the people that know the history know you were the guy. But then fast forward, we know how you feel about the Mayweather-McGregor fight. You probably didn't even watch it, I'm guessing. But what were your feelings on that fight being put together?
I think I sent it to Jeff or you. I had written something 3 months ago that was supposed to be an op-ed, and it didn't get published because it was too controversial. But basically, I had a lot of problems with it because I don't know, say my son Enzo, was going to be a boxer, right? He was going to turn pro, and but he never really had an amateur career, and we would have a really hard time getting him a 4-round fight, even though, I know a lot of people in the boxing world. In fact, Dan Duba was going to back Extreme Fighting, and Dan died a week later.
Wow.
So his son didn't like it and didn't back it. But anyway, so I know a lot of people in the boxing world. I fought at Gleason's gym in New York City as a kickboxer. I was invited to fight there and to train there with boxers, and I got tooled, by the way, really tooled. I mean, I pissed chunks of blood for weeks, and they were being world champions were being middleweights. I mean, I was welterweight. Were being nice. Also, I might add. So, you got a guy who's never boxed before, gets licensed by people who don't have licenses, right?
I heard Conor started with boxing. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I heard Conor back in Ireland or whatever started with boxing and then moved into MMA. I don't know if he fought, obviously not professionally, but I think from what I understand, he did have some background in boxing.
Sure didn't look like it. But anyway.
All right.
In fact, if I held my chin that high and back, I mean, can you imagine if somebody really wanted to hurt him in a boxing match?
The way I looked at it is, because many years back, Winky Wright and my group we had even sat down in a hotel room in Hollywood, California, and discussed doing a mixed martial arts fight, and also had started discussing.
I recall this, by the way.
Yeah, and we started talking.
I knew Winky.
And Roy Jones also.
There you go. I was going to bring it up, but go ahead.
Roy Jones agreed to do the fight with me in mixed martial arts if I promised to stand with him for the first 5-minute round, which obviously is a dangerous idea. But
frightening.
Yeah, I mean, he's a vicious guy. But he said, look, I've got to get this fight out of the way. I'm going to Australia to fight. Once I do that, then you and I, we can sit down and get this thing worked out and get it done. And so Roy, what screwed up the deal between Roy and I is Roy went to Australia and got KO'd. And so that took the shine off of it a little bit, obviously. And then Winky Wright's camp, there was one guy who was a go-between who turned into a complete pain in the ass and started threatening lawsuits if he didn't get a certain percentage and all that. And all he was basically it would have been a finder's fee.
Okay, so let me interrupt you and let me predate you. I wanted Health Gracie to fight Roy Jones. We went to Roy Jones's press conference, and I had Health actually go up to him and challenge him. And it's the truth. And Roy wanted no part of it. He wanted no part of this new thing. And Roy was maniacal. He was incredible. I mean, he didn't throw a jab until he turned into a heavyweight. Roy was. I would not have wanted to see you box with Roy Jones, champ. So
well, I mean, I spent a lot of. Here's the thing. I spent a lot of years sparring with a lot of very, very high level boxers. A lot of.
I'm aware of that.
But I never once got knocked out. Not saying that Roy Jones with MMA gloves wouldn't have ripped my head off, but there's ways of doing it with front kicks, whatever, slow down their progress. But my thing was, look, to be fair, and he knew, to be fair to him, if I could make it to the second round, then he was all mine, and look, we both stood to make a considerable amount of money, certainly millions, and I would have been done. I mean, who knows what I'd be doing right now? I certainly.
You're talking to me.
No, I'm sure I'd probably be hanging out, to be honest with you.
We're breaking up a little bit.
Anyway, here's my point. I'm really happy I had no part in it. I'm quite offended that Marciano's record, gets looked at, with lesser integrity now. And I'm amazed that that if you might say that he has a boxing background, I would say that he has no professional boxing background. He should have had a 4-rounder against. It was not fun. I'm a pugilistic purist. I created 2 sports. I don't know anybody that you're going to ever speak to that created 2 sports. Right. I'm gonna have actual reasons for disliking something, and I can back up those reasons. But more importantly, this has occurred, and how it occurred, I'll never know. And how it went down, I thought it. I just heard that Dan Severn's going to fight Royce Gracie. Well, did everyone a real boxing match? Did anyone forget? I think it was in Iowa, wasn't it?
So let me ask you this question before we go, John.
Sure.
If you if you got a call from me and I said, hey, backer with $1 billion, and we've got a TV contract, do you want to come back again? Would you do it? All right. Just throwing that out there.
We're not. Fuck.
Well, I miss you, Pat, and I thank you for having me on, and thank you, Jeff. I appreciate it, and you guys are doing a great job.
Thank you, John. It's been good talking to you, brother, and stay healthy, okay?
Okay, thank you.
All right, take care.
Bye-bye.